Howdy mates, how are we doing this afternoon? It is Monday, April 12th, 2021, and in this video I want to focus upon a particular flower that many of us highly value in this time of the year. For those of you who may not know what these flowers are called, these are also known as tulips. And regarding the tulip, I first want to start off that tulips are not native to North America, as a matter of fact. I know for some of you that may actually sound very surprising, but it is true. They are not from North America. Rather, according to historical recording, you figure you go back way into the 9th century, so we're talking a long time ago. These were actually found to be wild in the Tien Shan mountains, which bordered around China and Tibet. So you're talking a very mountainous range. So then what happened was, just from the looks of them, many people valued them for their beauty. It was actually then introduced to the country of Turkey. Isn't that wild to think about? So you figure you go back during the Ottoman Empire, and that was when the tulips were so highly valued in that country. I mean, they were so highly valued to a point of where almost anyone who was wealthy would have a tulip in their garden. I mean, that's how serious they were. And what's actually fascinating too is if you derive the word tulip in the Pakistani language, it actually means turban, as a matter of fact. And in terms of why they decided to call it turban, I'm not entirely certain, but that's how it gets its background. So, one of the sultans, the Sultan Ahmed III, was one of those people who highly valued them, and he was one of the rulers of the Ottoman Empire. So then, we fast forward a bit, going into the going into the 1700s. An individual by the name of Ogier Busbecq, who was actually an ambassador to Constantinople, which was essentially the central city of the Ottoman Empire, he actually had a very close friend by the name of Carolus Clusius. And Carolus Clusius was actually a well-known botanist who lived in Holland, also known as the Netherlands. He actually led something called the Hortus Botanicus. It was essentially the first botanical garden established in Europe back in 1587. So part of what Carolus was doing was he was simply researching the different types of flowers that were around his area during the time and experimenting with them. He just tried to understand the life cycles of flowers. And his friend, Ogier, from Turkey, he actually brought some of the bulbs with him. And what's fascinating is these bulbs, which are usually planted, such as it was in this case, they look very similar to an onion. So, another folktale has it that, I know I'm kind of all over the place, But folktale has it that a sailor accidentally mistaken a tulip bulb for an onion, and the sailor was actually sent to prison because it was considered to be a felony to eat a bulb from the tulips, which were so highly valued just because of their sheer beauty and just the variety of colors that they come in. So in this case, we have white, red. There's some that can even be yellow, too. But going back to the subject of Carolus Clusius, let's just say he made the tulip become very popular in the Netherlands as well. And actually, there was an economic crisis known as the Tulipmania, where people would literally spend their life savings to be able to get any seeds or bulbs that cultivated the tulips. I mean, it's insane. That was back in the 1600s. So then, we fast forward a bit more, going into the 20th century. So, not that long ago, people started to hybridize them. And due to that hybridizing, that's how we really get that variation in so many of the different colors that tulips can have. So who knows? Like, some of these tulips right here, it may not even be their natural color. It's just a result of a hybrid, basically messing around with the genetic makeup of a flower. Because that's usually why humans in the past have done hybridizing. Because there might be a certain trait that they might value as a result. Even though it's not always natural. So eventually, because of how popular they were in both Turkey and Amsterdam, or Holland, that was something they both finally had in common, even though one of the countries is in Europe and one of the countries is in Asia. So you figure eventually these became popular globally, and thus that is really how the bulbs became introduced to the United States, and why in this instance we have them right here. I mean, this is only one spot at the Wittenberg. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm at the Wittenberg campus. Forgot to mention that. But this is just one spot where you can see these tulips. There's even more way over there by the Thomas Library. I mean, it's just amazing how much history is actually carried behind one particular type of flower. So even though they're not native, they're not invasive, though. They usually have to be planted. Like, physically, they don't always reproduce as easily on their own. But the thing is, it could be a controversial issue, too. Some people may think it is invasive, but it isn't necessarily, because it's not necessarily impacting the other native vegetation that is found here. It becomes invasive when it is harming any native flora. So, yeah, I mean, tulips typically represent the concept of love. I mean, these are the flowers that we usually use for Mother's Day, for instance, or just for gardening, I mean, they're almost everywhere. But yeah, I just thought I would provide some insight. It was something I saw, and I'm like, I want to do some research on this and then just share it to you guys so you can know a bit more about the tulips that many of you, I'm sure, have at your homes. You know? There's always a story behind something. Oh yeah, and that's Mr. Walt. Yeah, of course with the mask on. Yep. Yeah. So, I hope you guys really learned something from this video. It was actually a bit of a pleasure to do this one, because it kind of mentions a bit both about the flora and a bit of the history that lies behind it too. So, forgive me for the length, but there was quite a bit to share because I had to condense a lot of information that came from several different articles. So, alright. Hope all of you enjoy your Monday, and Journey on a Journey is outwards. Take care, folks.